Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating paradox. We're looking at why having high intelligence doesn't automatically equal high wealth. In fact, sometimes it literally works against you. We're going to dig into the science, the psychology, and the hard data to figure out exactly why your brain might be keeping you broke. And, more importantly, we'll talk about how to build a system to fix the whole shebang. Okay, so let's dive right into this incredibly frustrating reality. You're smart, you've got a good salary, you might even have a couple of degrees under your belt. So, why does your bank account tell a completely different story? It's a question that plagues a ton of high achievers who find themselves quietly struggling with money, while people they consider, let's just say, less intellectually gifted, are out there building real sustainable wealth.
Consider this tale of two earners from our sources. On one side, we've got Marcus. He plays the long game, lives a super modest lifestyle, automates his savings, and honestly, zero financial anxiety. On the other side, we have Ryan. Ryan's driving a leased BMW, living in a really nice postcode to signal his success, but secretly, he's experiencing massive financial stress. They're living in the same decade, making similar incomes, but experiencing totally different realities. Why is that?
Well, this perfectly illustrates a core, super frustrating problem. Intelligence absolutely does not immunize you against poor financial decisions. We really like to think of finance as pure logic, right? Just numbers, spreadsheets, and compound interest. But the truth is, money is heavily tied up with emotion, security, and status. A high IQ simply doesn't protect you from these emotional financial traps. In fact, it can sometimes make them a whole lot worse.
You might be wondering, why on earth is that? Well, it's because smart people are absolute experts at rationalizing their emotional decisions and fears. If you're highly intelligent, you don't just feel afraid. You logically explain your fear. You effectively mask your fear of losing money or your fear of just getting started as this highly analytical need for more data. You convince yourself it's just not the right time. But strip away all those big fancy words, it's really just the same old fear.
Section 1. Your brain's money biases. The crucial point here is understanding the specific, hardwired cognitive biases that are quietly destroying our financial futures. First up is analysis paralysis. This is basically the inability to make a decision because you have way too much information. In today's market, you've got unlimited data at zero cost. But consuming all that data creates this illusion that more information equals better choices. Instead, it just leads to missed opportunities. You spend literally decades perfecting your market research, while someone else just takes action and reaps the rewards. Next is present bias. This is a weird evolutionary quirk, making us overvalue a smaller, immediate reward over a much greater future payoff. When you see a killer jacket, your brain doesn't naturally calculate what that money could become if invested over 15 years. It just sees the awesome jacket right now. Our ancestors survived by solving today's problems, like, running away from a tiger. But building wealth requires thinking in decades.
Then there's loss aversion, a concept made famous by Daniel Kahneman's prospect theory. Get this, the psychological pain of losing is actually twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining. This proves that our fear of losing heavily distorts rational risk-taking. Smart people will often hold on to losing investments far too long, just hoping they bounce back, or they avoid investing entirely because the mere idea of a temporary dip is just too painful to handle.
And this naturally leads us into the pain of paying. Mental accounting tricks our brain into separating money into subjective little categories rather than viewing our total wealth objectively. So the pain of an expense is compared to the size of the account it depletes. This is exactly why swiping a credit card feels so much easier than handing over physical cash. The payment gets absorbed into a much larger balance, which reduces that immediate psychological sting, and that can lead to some truly disastrous overspending. And finally, we have hedonic adaptation. This sneaky bias ensures that no matter how much your salary grows, your lifestyle spending creeps up right alongside it. That brand new car feels incredible for about 3 weeks, and then, well, it's just a car. Your brain adapts incredibly rapidly to new levels of comfort, keeping you on this exhausting treadmill where you literally have to spend more and more just to feel the exact same level of satisfaction. Section 2. The cognitive data. To really see how all this translates into numbers, let's look at a fascinating 35-year plus one study. This research tracks the objective, data-driven relationship between cognitive ability and personal finance. The researchers tested multiple mathematical models to move way beyond the simple assumption that being smarter always scales in a straight line with wealth. They wanted to see if the relationship could be exponential, show diminishing returns, or maybe even be curvilinear, like a U-shape. And here is one of their most striking findings: the U-shaped debt curve. It turns out negative financial behaviors like taking on high-interest debt actually peak for those with average cognitive ability. Think about it for a second. Those with lower cognitive ability might not even have access to credit, and those at the very top might earn enough to avoid it. But smart, average to high earners, they have totally unchecked access to credit and the confidence to use it, which often leads them right into a massive debt trap.
However, it's not all doom and gloom. There is a clear linear benefit when it comes to peace of mind. Subjective financial stress drops consistently as cognitive ability increases. So higher intelligence does actually give you the capacity to worry less about money, provided you actually use that intelligence to manage it well.
The data also shows a really clear upward curve for holding investment accounts as cognitive ability rises. But remember what we talked about earlier. Your intelligence is only an asset if you overcome the psychological hurdles first. Knowing exactly what to do and actually doing it are two very, very different things.
Section 3, rewiring your brain.
Okay, so knowing the problem is only half the battle. Let's get into the practical playbook to outsmart our own evolutionary wiring. The first fix is called temporal distancing. This means actively projecting yourself into the future to treat your future self as a real living person. Research shows that when you genuinely visualize the older version of yourself, your brain stops treating them like a total stranger. It makes it so much easier to save money today when you actively care about the person who's going to be spending it tomorrow.
Next up, implement the 2-week rule we saw earlier with Marcus. Whenever you feel the impulse to buy something significant, literally force yourself to wait 2 weeks. Then after that time passes, reassess the desire. This simple little filter strips all the emotional heat out of a purchase. It stops you from buying things just to feel normal or to fit in, and it keeps thousands of dollars out of the endless consumption economy.
Let's also establish some new rules of engagement. Rule number 1, remove willpower entirely. Automate your investing. Pay yourself first before you even see the money hit your checking account. And instead of obsessing over spreadsheets and tracking every single penny, track your general direction. Ask yourself, am I further ahead today than I was last month? Judge the process, not just the individual outcomes.
And to combat that crippling analysis paralysis we talked about, the absolute key is to simply start with smaller positions. This drastically reduces the emotional pressure. You just have to accept market uncertainty. You are literally never going to have perfect information, and hey, that is completely okay. Acting consistently with small, manageable investments will always beat standing on the sidelines trying to predict the absolute perfect time to jump in.
Which brings us to the ultimate question you have to ask yourself. What does enough actually look like for you? Because once you step outside this crazy system of manufactured dissatisfaction and you clearly define your own personal destination, you finally stop playing everyone else's financial game. And that, my friends, is how you finally let your brain help you get rich. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this gave you some powerful tools to rewire your financial future.